What's up, guys? It's Joe, and we're back with our week 5 video. As always, I'm joined by Luke, and as always, guys, Underdog. I don't know what you guys are waiting on right now. Use code analyst, go on Underdog. They're going to match your first deposit up to $500 for a limited time. So if you want the most bang for your buck on that app, now is the time to act on that. Luke, how are you doing? How are you feeling after the the Justin Fields and DJ Moore show from yesterday? How are you feeling?
Definitely an interesting game. I don't have too many shares of Justin Fields or DJ Moore. Didn't really impact me too much, but it's good to see the Bears, getting back on track. I think what do they lose 14 straight games? Good to see them get a win. It's been a struggle there for a while now. I don't know if I'm going to expect this to continue. They did play against two teams that are kind of struggling just as bad as they've been, but it was sort of like a feel good game for them. Just, you know, good feeling heading into next week.
And they got a pretty light schedule coming up as well. I believe they get Vikings, Raiders, and another team as well. So they got a pretty light schedule going forward. I think this could be kind of like what we see from the Bears offense, at least for the next couple of weeks. And sometimes that's all you need to kind of establish the groundwork to go forward. So even if they get tougher matchups down the stretch, if they've already established this Justin Fields and DJ Moore connection through 2 games, I mean, that could be the catalyst to kind of keep that going for the rest of the season. Someone else who looked good was Logan Thomas, 20 points yesterday. And for the tight end landscape being as bad as it is, as we always say, he's not a bad target on waivers. I think he's going to be among the top waiver grabs going into week 6. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But that being said, let's just jump straight into the games. We got a couple bye weeks this week, so the video is not going to be as long. But we can start off with Jaguars versus Bills in London. Luke, first of all, what was your thoughts on that Toy Story rendition of the game last week? I think they're doing it again this week. What do you think about
Yeah, I did not watch that. I did see
it?
clips of it online
Yeah, I
though,
saw
and
too.
especially that one clip of the touchdown where it just started glitching out. That was that was pretty hilarious. But I don't know, it was a cool thing to see. It reminds you of the Nickelodeon cast and stuff like that. Just interesting way to try and grow the game, I guess.
I like the Slinky Dog as the way to move the chain and the claw to drop the football. I had a couple family members, friends who said that they were watching football with like their kids for the first time and they were actually kind of understanding the game. So definitely see some benefits with it. So I think they're going to do that again this week with the Jaguars and the Bills. Um, as far as the matchup goes, though, for Buffalo, we're looking at guys like James Cook. And again, we're not going to go over players like Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Obviously, you're starting these guys week in and week out. But when it comes to James Cook, he's averaging 55% of the snaps. He's getting 17 touches a game. I think this is a matchup where they're going to be up. The Bills have a negative 5.5 spread on the Jaguars in this matchup, so I believe they are going to be ahead in this game in London. I think their defense is playing lights out even without Tre'Davious White. But a player I do want to talk about is Dalton Kincaid. So Dalton Kincaid had a 100% route participation last week, and he's playing 65% of his snaps from the slot, all which are good things. But the problem with Dalton Kincaid is the targets and his average depth of targets. So he's not seeing nearly enough targets to be relevant, and his average depth of target is about 4 yards. So that's the problem with Kincaid in terms of we want the production out of him, but we're not going to see that until the targets become 8 or 9 targets a game, which I don't think we're ever going to see with guys like Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, and then they have that running game through James Cook. So when it comes to Kincaid, he's going to be riding the bench until we start to see that change. He is playing the slot role like they imagined when they drafted him in the first round, but it's just not enough, and the targets just aren't consistent enough for him to be in fantasy lineups, at least for right now. But any other Bills players that you're really looking at right now?
Nope, that kind of comes through it. I just think, James Cook is sort of into that Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs conversation now of like, we don't even need to talk about him at this point. He's in your lineup pretty much every week by now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the Jacksonville side of the ball, I mean, Travis Etienne, we know who he is. We know he's going to be a weekly contributor. But how do we feel about Calvin Ridley? I mean, the targets have gone down from 11 targets to 8 targets to 7 targets. And last week, only 2 targets. Thankfully, one of those was a touchdown against his former team. But going to this matchup, I think the Jaguars are going to be forced to pass the ball. No Tre'Davious White. He ruptured his Achilles last week. Are you comfortably starting Calvin Ridley this week? Are you regrettably starting Calvin Ridley this week? Or are you sitting Calvin Ridley this week?
I do think this is a decent matchup game script wise for Calvin Ridley, even Christian Kirk as well. Calvin Ridley just hasn't been making the plays. I mean, we mentioned last week how he's been in those missing points posts over on fantasy guides this whole time, pretty much every week. He's just not making the plays. He's not toe tapping. He's dropping passes in the end zone. And last week he only saw 2 targets, as you said. Yeah. So things just aren't going right. And I do think he is really to blame for it. I don't think there's some issue where the coaches aren't using him in the game plan or whatever. I think he's just not making the plays, and he got less targets last week because of it. That being said, this should be a good game script. You mentioned the Bills will be likely winning most of this game. Jacksonville's going to have to throw the ball to catch up, and Calvin Ridley, I think, is still their number 1 wide receiver. I don't see how they could sort of get off of that plan this early with what they've been, all the time they've invested in him, even with the suspension. So I think Calvin Ridley, I would describe it as a regrettable start, I suppose, only because I've been starting him every week so far. But I think he has a good chance to get it right this week, especially he's been in London this whole time. The Bills just flew over. So hoping for the best.
Yeah. And now, okay, if you have Christian Kirk and you have Calvin Ridley, who are you starting?
I'd probably start Kirk in most cases for the safety, but if I'm projected to lose by a lot of points, I'd just throw Ridley in there and hope he has a big day like week 1.
So if you're going against DJ Moore or Justin Fields and you happen to have Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, a very specific situation, but there's got to be at least one guy out there or one girl out there who is dealing with this situation to start Calvin Ridley in that case. Next game here, we got the Houston Texans taking on the Atlanta Falcons. This is a 1:00 game. Falcons are favored by 1.5 points. Now, the issue with guys like Kyle Pitts and Drake London, which continues to be the talk 4 weeks into the season with the Falcons, is their catchable target rates, which are among the lowest in the entire league. So Kyle Pitts has the lowest catchable target rate in the entire league with 52.1%. And Drake London's not too far away with him with a 61.9% catchable target rate. Those are awful numbers, and this is just a result of bad quarterback play. So we see the targets that are going towards London's way, and we see the targets that are going towards Pitt's way at some point during the drive, or Jonnu Smith's way, more so. But it just kind of becomes a story of whether they're going to replace Desmond Ridder or not. I mean, if they make that move, I think that significantly improves the value of guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And they do have Taylor Heineke to back up Desmond Ridder. So I think if they lose this game against the Texans, which is very possible, and by the way, if you're a betting person, again, Falcons favored by 1.5 points, I would very easily take the Houston Texans here to kind of cover that at the very least at a 1.5 point spread. But yeah, I think once the Falcons kind of get a different quarterback in there, even if it's Taylor Heineke, I think they'll be much more efficient through the air. And we'll see guys like Drake London and maybe even Kyle Pitts start to become more consistent. But as of right now, there is no way I'm buying in on any of these guys. But on the flip side, for the Texans, Nico Collins, he's currently PFF's 4th highest graded wide receiver. What do we think about this Texans offense? CJ Stroud, full go. Nico Collins, full go. Are you starting Tank Dell? Are you starting Dameon Pierce? What are your thoughts against the Falcons this week?
There's something, I don't know if it's a gut feeling or what it is, but there's something inside of me that says that by the end of the season, Tank Dell is going to be sort of the guy in this offense that it seems like Nico Collins is right now. But at this point, you can't really bench Nico Collins the way things are going. Obviously, yeah. I mean, CJ Stroud is probably a low to mid-end QB1 most weeks going forward. I'm still starting Tank Dell as well. I think he's a good flex option against this Falcons team. Dameon Pierce, probably starting him just because, I mean, the running back market's not too much better than the tight end market at the
Yeah.
moment. So probably starting Pierce as well. Not really excited about that one. This Houston team seems like more of a passing offense at this point. They're still struggling to run the ball. So I will be starting Pierce. Another regrettable start. But yeah, love this passing game and love these weapons in my lineups.
I think we'll make a Twitter thread later today with a regrettable start list for heading into Week 5 with Calvin Ridley and Dameon Pierce kind of headlining that list there. Next game here, we got Lions versus Panthers. This is another 1 o'clock game. Lions favored by 10 points in this matchup, which for me just kind of speaks Monty, right? I mean, this is a team that even when they were up as much as they were last week, they just did not go towards Jahmyr Gibbs' way. Monty ran away with it. He got 34 points. This is another game where Monty can just kind of destroy the Panthers on the ground. I'm hoping that they can start to get Jahmyr Gibbs more involved, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Sam Laporta, he's averaging 85% route run rate, which is awesome for tight ends, especially rookie tight ends. He's second in targets on the team behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, who did not practice Friday. So that leaves his status for Sunday up in the air. There's a chance Amon-Ra St. Brown does not play. And if he doesn't, Sam Laporta is immediately a top 2, top 3 tight end, if he's not already top 5. On the Panthers side of the ball, running backs for the Panthers are seeing a 23% target share. Thielen seems to be the only consistent option in this offense. Do we think Bryce is at some point going to make it right and get some of these other guys involved? Jonathan Mingo, he's going to be coming back more than likely to this game after he had his concussion. Are there any of these Panthers players that you're buying in for the future possibility that Bryce Young starts to get it right, or this Panthers offense just starts to click? Because we've seen that happen before, especially with rookie quarterbacks who just reach a point during the season where everything just starts clicking, and then all of a sudden, all these guys become very viable. So, is there anyone in this offense that you're looking to buy on right now for the possibility of that in the future?
Yeah, and just, the quick disclaimer, you posed the question this way, but I'll just make sure I'm not talking about this week. Bryce Young and the Panthers have not looked great.
Yeah.
And I don't trust, it's one of those, I can't do it until I see these guys perform at least once type of situations. But I do. Bryce Young was the first overall pick for a reason. I think he's going to get it right eventually. And I've seen a lot of leagues where Jonathan Mingo is getting dropped, and I picked him up in a bunch of them. So I'm stashing Jonathan Mingo sort of near the bottom of my bench. He's not touching my lineups, nothing close to it, but just sort of stashing him. I think that may be one of these opportunities you get where your league mates are dropping these rookies or young players with upside a bit too early into the season. Like, why are you drafting them if you're dropping Jonathan Mingo by week 3? So I'm stashing Jonathan Mingo in a bunch of leagues.
And I think that kind of speaks to Christian Watson last year. We saw Watson early in the year. He had a lot of opportunities for touchdowns. I think he dropped like 2 touchdowns in one game on that primetime game, disappeared for 5 weeks or so. And then it was like week 9, week 10, and all of a sudden Christian Watson was a weekly like wide receiver 1 for everyone. So I think Jonathan Mingo, another raw player, super talented guy. Not saying it's going to be the same exact scenario, but I think a similar story can happen with a guy like Mingo, where everybody's kind of given up on him up to this point, and then you get halfway through the season, and you're like, maybe there is opportunity for a guy like Mingo to come in and be the wide receiver 1 for this team. So I agree. I agree with that assessment. This matchup here, we have the Titans versus the Colts, another 1 o'clock game. Luke, tell me about these Colts. Tell me about your excitement for a guy like not for Amon-Ra St. Brown, like Anthony Richardson. We gotta. Is that a cell phone?
Do you want? Yeah. Do you want to Do you want to just run the Titans Colts over again? We cut this
Yeah,
part out.
you know what? I'll just do it. This is all live. This is all.
Your mic is like
not working.
Cutting it. I like the other mic better.
Oh no.
I don't know if like now that we're starting to record, you're like moving more, but it's making a noise every time you talk.
Oh no. All right, I'll try to get that fixed in for next week, but we'll see.
Okay.
Am I sounding okay enough?
Right now you are, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna
And you
not move.
sound good, but like when you're talking, you're like moving, and it sounds like I don't. It sounds like you're using a microphone and then turning it off every
Oh,
time.
has it been like that the whole time?
Yeah, but not like when you asked if you sounded okay before we started, it wasn't like that. And I just think you weren't moving your body when you were talking before.
I
I think you're
move a
more
lot.
animated.
Oh
Yeah.
God. When you're doing the when you're doing the time frames for this episode, just make sure you put like technical difficulties and just have that little
Yeah,
time space for.
we'll cut this out.
I'm bold of you to think I will edit this out. Let's move on to the Titans and the Colts here. I'm gonna try not to move anymore, but for the Colts side of the football, Anthony Richardson, four rushing touchdowns in 3 games. What do you think about this offense and their chances against the Titans? Who the Titans are favored by 2.5 points, so there's a lot of spreads this week that I'm just like really questionable about. But what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Hmm. And typically, when there are spreads that we don't like, that usually means that we're wrong, and all of these spreads are going to go exactly the opposite way that we think.
Yep.
But I do think, Jonathan Taylor should be his first game back. I am starting him in the one league that I have him in. I think there's likely going to be a bit of a problem where Anthony Richardson's vulturing a ton of his touchdowns. But at the end of the day, this offense is going to be one that wants to run the ball, similar to the Eagles. That's kind of where this whole offensive game plan is coming from. So I do think Jonathan Taylor can get his. This is a bit of a tough matchup to re enter towards. And that's why I'm sort of falling more towards Michael Pittman for this week. The Titans
Mm.
haven't been very good against receivers, especially number one receivers this year. And Michael Pittman, in what should be a close game, should see those 10, 11 targets that he had been seeing earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor is a guy who I'm lowering my expectations on this week. Just as you mentioned, it's not a great matchup. The Titans are pretty good at run stuffing. So I think we're going to see a situation where he's not going to be very efficient on the ground. Anthony Richardson, I already mentioned, has 4 rushing touchdowns in 3 games. Zach Moss has been playing pretty well in Jonathan Taylor's absence. So I just don't think they put him completely on the shelf either. I think they'll get him for a couple carries here and there as well. So in his first game back, I'm going to lower my expectations on Jonathan Taylor, which typically means that if you have him, you're starting him, but just don't be surprised if he underperforms in his first game back. And on the flip side of things, um, and by the way, you did mention that Michael Pittman, great start this week. I agree with that. Titans are allowing the fifth most points to wide receivers, so I just didn't want to move on without hitting on that. Titans on the flip side of things, Colts are also giving up the seventh most points to wide receivers. So if this becomes a game where the Colts get up early, we've seen where the Titans end up in a losing game script and Derrick Henry kind of just disappears. If that ends up being the case, I think we could see DeAndre Hopkins have a sneaky good game in this matchup. He seems healthier now than he was over the last couple of weeks. We know he was dealing with injuries. So yeah, I wouldn't hate DeAndre Hopkins in my lineup this week either. Now, how am I sounding? Am I sounding better? I'm trying not to move.
Again, at the end, just a little bit of like a weird noise, like a staticky noise.
Maybe it's the microphone. I don't know.
I see, like just
What
right there, you did it again.
like this?
Right after it, you turned your head and it made a noise.
This
Right
does
there.
something?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man, I gotta stay really still. Oh god. All right, next matchup. I'm trying to move around here. Dolphins versus Giants. Why don't you start this one off? We got
Mm-hmm.
your boy Devon A. Chain. Dolphins favored by 10 points in this matchup.
Yep, and I think that's about right. The Giants look terrible. Their blocking is some of the worst blocking I've ever seen. Daniel Jones sacked 11 times last week. One of the best offensive linemen in the league, Andrew Thomas, is going to be out again this week. Rookie second round pick John Michael Schmitz is going to be out again this week. So they're going to have this makeshift offensive line in there again. A couple of them have had single digit PFF pass blocking grades for the past 2 weeks. And that's probably going to continue even against this Dolphins defense that's been struggling. So I'm not expecting much from the Giants, regardless of if Saquon comes back. I saw he's listed as questionable. He's been limited in practice over the week, so we'll see what happens. I don't think it really matters for the overall scope of the game. From the Dolphins side, it's pretty much the usual. I do think the Giants defense is pretty bad, and that both of these running backs could have an impact again. Mostert and A-Chain, I think, are like the running back 2 and 3 right now in fantasy, and this is another good matchup for them to continue to do what they've been doing.
Now, a player to really look for in this matchup is going to. Luke, I will give you 3 guesses for the player that I am looking at really hard in this matchup, and I can guarantee you will not get it in 3 guesses.
Please don't say Chase Claypool.
No, no, he's
Good.
not even going to
Okay.
play.
All right. Let's think of weird players here. Jeff Wilson.
No,
Braxton Berrios
he
led the
doesn't
team in
play
targets
offense.
last week.
He doesn't
Oh
play
boy.
offense.
The kicker? I have no idea.
Andrew Van Ginkel. If you play IDP and you need a great start for this week, you just mentioned Giants' left tackle is out, their center is out, and their guard is also going to be missing this game. Andrew Van Ginkel has 3 sacks in the last 3 weeks. He's got a ton of tackles. He has been their best pass rusher, believe it or not, with Jalen Phillips out. So if you need a player for your IDP leagues and you want to get some free good points, Andrew Van Ginkel is your guy this week. Weird name, I know. But outside of that, Andrew Van Ginkel mess. Saquon Barkley, as you mentioned, practicing limited. Usually a limited practice schedule means they will suit up for the game. I think Barkley was close to suiting up Monday, so a week of limited practice, I imagine he will play in this game against the Dolphins. If he does, he's a running back 1. I will start him based on volume. I think he's going to see a ton of targets. Uh, Again, there's just a re-injury risk as always. And the Dolphins' defense isn't anything crazy. But again, if your quarterback's under pressure, he's going to want to get the ball out quick. I think they're going to have a lot of design dump offs to Saquon Barkley, a lot of design like short passing screens, things like that. So, or at least they should if they know what's good for them. But they probably won't. So let's move on to a game that I'm depressed to watch, which is the Saints versus the Patriots. Patriots fan, I just don't trust anyone on this team. Saints are allowing the 7th least points to running backs. I'm going to be sitting Ramondre Stevenson this week. So Ramondre Stevenson last year had about an 18 to 19% target share. That has changed this year. This year he's about a 10% target share, and that was really the thing that was putting him over the top last year was just the target volume that he was getting. Also, Zeke has been splitting a lot of snaps with Ramondre Stevenson. It seems like Stevenson gets about 55 to 60% of the snaps, and then Zeke's right there with 40 to 45%. He seems to be getting a healthy amount of targets and work on the ground as well. So this is a 50-50 backfield against the bad matchup on an offense that is just failing to do anything right now. So if you're able to, I'm probably sitting Ramondre Stevenson this week. If you're not able to, Godspeed. The only Patriot I would probably consider this week is Hunter Henry, just because he's been somewhat consistent, and as bad as the tight ends are, he's probably got among the best chance to have a good game. But again, not anything crazy. But Alvin Kamara, we're getting flamed, Luke. We're getting lit on fire for saying to sell Alvin Kamara, but he took 14 targets for 2.5 yards per catch. No touchdowns. Was pretty good on the ground, actually. But 14 targets, I don't think anyone saw coming, and he did not do much of anything with them. What I think this is a chance for Chris Olave to bounce back. You have the Patriots secondary absolutely decimated right now. You know it's bad when you have to trade for J.C. Jackson, who was like benched by the Chargers, one of the worst like secondaries in the league, and he got benched. So their rookie Christian Gonzalez, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. I think he had a labrum tear in his shoulder. Matthew Judon, he's going to be missing some time, so they're not going to have as much of a pass rush against the Saints. I just see this as a game where Chris Olave can kind of bounce back. I don't think Derek Carr is going to be under as much fire as he was last week. And he was also playing injured. Derek Carr probably shouldn't have played last week, which is, that kind of speaks to the reasons why he was just dumping the ball off to Kamara 14 times during that game. I think it's going to be a little bit of a different story in this one.
Yep, I agree. And I think as you said, it kind of depends on Derek Carr's health. Should certainly be healthier than last week. We'll see how healthy he is. But just because of that question mark, this is one of these rare games where I don't really see any must start players. I don't think a single person is going to be in every lineup this week. Even Chris Olave, who's been reliable all year. If Carr comes out and his shoulder still isn't right, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, I agree. It's just kind of a messy situation, and we hope that he gets better because, Chris Olave, we're missing out on those points for sure. And it's a good matchup, as I mentioned. So, next matchup here, we have Cardinal. Oh wait, the Steelers versus. Oh, I didn't make one for the Steelers versus Bengals, or Steelers versus Ravens. All right, we're just gonna talk about Steelers versus Ravens real quick. Marlon Humphrey. Not sure if he's going to play in this matchup, but I'm just really not targeting anyone from the Steelers offense. Did you see the stuff about Matt Canada's burner account, by the way?
Yeah, I
That
believe it.
is absolutely, I believe it too, because someone looked for his email and it was like matthew.canada@steelers.com. Absolutely insane. Matt Canada is just one of the worst offensive coordinators in the entire league. And I don't know if you saw it, but the burner, he was like taking shots at like Chris Boswell for some reason. And I was confused about that. I was like, why is he taking shots at Chris Boswell? And then I went and I saw on TikTok someone posted the one game where Matt Canada was celebrating their win, and Chris Boswell shouts, "It wasn't because of you," or like something like that. So Chris Boswell is enemy number one for Matt Canada. George Pickens is evidently enemy number two because he just can't take this talented receiver and just make him useful at all. So I'm not looking at any of these Steelers players in this matchup. I think the Ravens defense is going to eat them up with Roquan Smith in the middle of that field. I think Gus Edwards is like a desperate flex play potentially. I think Steelers are pretty bad against the running backs here, but Zay Flowers, currently seventh in targets and as far as target share goes through 4 weeks. That's a great matchup against the Steelers secondary. I don't hate Zay Flowers. And as much as, we sit here and say like Kenny Pickett, who's dealing with that bone bruise, as much as we don't like the Steelers offense, usually division games are fairly close, especially since these between these two teams. So I think the Ravens are going to have to pass it, and I think that Zay Flowers could be the main contributor of that. So I don't hate Zay Flowers in this matchup at all. Let's move on real quick to the Cardinals versus Bengals. Our first 4:00 game. Arizona Cardinals. The Bengals are actually. I'm sorry. The Bengals are favored in this matchup by 3.5 points. I think there's a good chance that the Cardinals can cover that as well, which, as you said, just means that they're not going to. T. Higgins likely going to miss this matchup and potentially even more time after that. This moves Boyd into a startable role in the flex, especially playing in that slot. What about the Cardinals side of the football? So Michael Wilson was a pretty popular waiver pickup this week. We have guys like Marquise Brown, James Conner, Zach Ertz. Which of these guys are you looking to start, and which of you guys are you looking to not start this week?
Look, I think the Cardinals situation is interesting because they're in this same sort of game script every week where they're playing in these close games and they're throwing the ball a ton. And as a result, I mean, Marquise Brown, Zach Ertz, and Michael Wilson have all been fantasy relevant. And then James Conner is getting pretty much all the groundwork, and it's keeping him relevant as well. And I don't really think anyone was expecting that coming from this Cardinals team, especially with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. It's been really interesting and good for fantasy owners. So I'm not opposed to starting any of those guys this week. I would probably lower my expectations for James Conner a little bit. And the Bengals defense has been pretty tough on receivers generally this year. So maybe Michael Wilson takes a bit of a hit as well. But I'm not opposed, again, to any of these guys in my lineups.
I agree. We can move on to the Rams and Eagles game. We just got confirmation that Cooper Kupp is officially going to play in this matchup. He's got a good matchup in the slot, and the Eagles are without Avonte Maddox right now. So I think Cooper Kupp could just absolutely eat in this game. Puka is likely going to see some Darius Slay in this matchup. And likely some less targets, but I'm still starting Puka. I'm just so on the Puka train at this point that you just kind of have to throw him in your lineup each week. On the Eagles side of the football, DeAndre Swift seems like he's going to be a weekly starter. AJ Brown coming off a monster week. Are you looking to start Devontae Smith? Are we worried about Dallas Goedert? Is it time to drop Dallas Goedert in fantasy leagues?
I think at this point you have AJ Brown, DeAndre Swift, and Devontae Smith are all basically every week starts, and then it gets a little muddy. I wouldn't say I'm dropping Dallas Goedert because he's in a boat where if you have an injury to either Brown or Devontae Smith, that Goddard is probably going to be a high end tight end one. Because, I mean, we saw it last year where there were four guys on the Eagles all producing every week, or two or three every week out of the four. And Goddard was routinely amongst those guys putting up big numbers every week. This year, we haven't really seen it. They're trying to run the ball a lot more, and that's what they've been doing because they've been winning every game. But Dallas Goedert is not near my starting lineups this week, even with the way tight ends are. So that's definitely a cause for concern. But again, in case of injury, he's almost like a tight end handcuff of sorts, where if one of these receivers goes down, he's the next man up to get those targets.
Yeah, I agree. And that's just kind of builds into his upside. So next matchup here, we got the Denver Broncos taking on the Jets. Nathaniel Hackett revenge game. Oh boy, how fun is that? Javonte Williams, there's a good chance he does not play in this matchup. Although he did practice Thursday, I think it would still be a long shot for him to play come Sunday. Jaleel McLaughlin is a big playmaker. We've complained about him, I think, about every single week when we do these videos about having one touch and then turning it into a touchdown and stealing it away from Javonte Williams. This could finally be his opportunity to kind of come in and get a decent workload. It's a decent matchup against the Jets, too. If I have him and I picked him up off waivers, there's a good chance of starting him in my flex or as my running back, too, especially on a week with 4 teams and a bye. So one player who I do like as a sneaky start this week is Marvin Mims. So Marvin Mims, he had a season-high snap count last week, and he's going to be matched up against Bryce Hall, who is one of the worst graded corners in the league for the Jets. DJ Reed's not expected to play in this game. Sauce is going to be all over Cortland Sutton, and then Jerry Jeudy in the slot is likely going to see a lot of Michael Carter II. So Marvin Mims, he's coming off a season high in snaps. We know it just takes one big play for him to do his thing. He's got the best matchup of the three receivers. If they start getting him more involved in this offense, I think Marvin Mims could be a sneaky desperate start this week. So don't be surprised if he blows up and he has that long touchdown because he really just needs one play, similar to Jaleel McLaughlin. So kind of a sneaky start on that front. For the Jets side of the football, seems like the Jets are taking the training wheels off Breece Hall. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's deserved, first off, because I think Breece Hall is an excellent player, and Dalvin Cook does not look good this year. I hope that this means that he's going to become viable in fantasy, although that will entail the Jets looking like they did last week and, actually running a real offense as opposed to giving the ball to Breece Hall every snap and letting 9 players in the box just murder him before he even makes it back to the line. So still up in the air on it. I think I'm starting him this week because, again, there aren't too many good running backs fantasy-wise in this league at this point. So Breece Hall, if I have him, which I don't, I think I'm starting him this week with hoping that Robert Saleh is giving us the truth here and that he's going to play, most of the snaps and get hopefully 15, 20 touches.
Yeah, and I want to give you credit because last week you called it. You said that the Jets were going to have to start passing the ball at some point. You got to see what you have in Zach Wilson, and they did. And Garrett Wilson got 14 targets. Garrett Wilson got a tough matchup this week against Pat Surtain in an offense that, again, as you just mentioned, like, are they going to do what they did last week, or are they just going to run back away from that? Do you feel comfortable starting Garrett Wilson this week?
I do. I think he's just far and away the best receiver the Jets have, and even with Surtain on him, they're going to find a way to get that ball in his hands.
Yeah, those are my thoughts exactly. I have Garrett Wilson in a couple leagues, and I'm starting him in all the leagues I have him. So, Godspeed. Another game here: Minnesota Vikings versus Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs. I can't say Chiefs. Big matchup here for the Vikings. This is a get-right game for them. They're currently 1-3. Alexander Madison, Cam Akers. How is that split going to work out in this game? Madison got the better of it last week, but that was also Akers' best game. Akers ran less routes than Madison, but he did have more targets. This is a game where I think the Chiefs are going to get up early. They didn't play well last week. I think they get right and they play really well this week. And it's going to cause the Vikings to pass the ball like 50 plus times, as we've seen them do multiple times this season, which is also why I like Jordan Addison a lot this week. I think the matchup specifically isn't great. The Chiefs are generally pretty good against receivers, but I think just the volume is going to be there, especially for the passing volume. So I have no problem putting Jordan Addison in my lineup. Any other thoughts on the Vikings? And on the flip side, Isaiah Pacheco is definitely someone we have to talk about.
Yep, nope. The Vikings, that's actually my only note on the Vikings is Jordan Addison. I just sort of have a gut feel that, a lot of passing, not every single throw can go to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. Although the Bears sort of did that yesterday with DJ Moore, right? But that, as you said, Jordan Addison should be in for usage upside alone this week. And then Isaiah Pacheco, you also mentioned, that's my only note on the Chiefs, is that this is a great matchup for him, and he seems to be taking over. And I think by the end of the season, we're going to see him probably take over most, if not all, of Clyde Edwards-Helaire's snaps. I think by the end of the season, Pacheco is going to be up there in like the 75-80% snap range. And that makes him an every week start going forward if he's on that trajectory.
Yeah, and I think he's kind of already moving towards that. So last week, Pacheco saw 60% of the offensive snaps, which I went back and looked. That's his career high. In the regular season at least. So we haven't seen Pacheco get this kind of workload before. 23 touches as well. If this kind of becomes the trend and they're trusting Pacheco as their RB1 going forward, I think he's got, every week must start type value. Another guy I want to mention this matchup is Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice saw a snap increase over the last 2 weeks as well. And even with the limited amount of snaps that he has been playing, he's second on the team in targets behind Kelsey. Minnesota's also ranked 32nd against wide receivers, which is last for those that are catching on. So if, again, desperate spot, Rashee Rice, potentially your guy this week. But we're talking desperate. We're not talking must start by any means. Sunday Night Football. We're already on Sunday Night Football. We're only 30 minutes in. That's great. 49ers versus Cowboys. So 49ers side of the football, Brandon Ayuk is looking like a legit number one wide receiver right now. Debo is not. How do you look at these wide receivers, and do you feel comfortable putting Debo in your lineup in a closer game this week than both these teams have probably seen this season?
This game has me weirdly lost in a way because not only is this a close matchup between two good teams, but it's a close matchup between two good offenses and two good defenses. So not only do I not know who's going to win this game, but I don't even really feel confident in deciding, is this going to be an offensive like shootout or a defensive battle? I'm leaning more on the side of offense as Micah Parsons appears to be at least a little bit hobbled by an injury, if not worse. And that makes me think Brandon Ayuk is a borderline wide receiver one this week. He seems to be Brock Purdy's favorite target. He's sort of erased George Kittle's role from the offense somehow. Yeah. I mean, George Kittle, widely regarded as one of the best tight ends in the league, he's just disappeared from the game script. So Brandon Ayuk, I think, is a must start this week.
And I think to kind of go with that too, on the Cowboys side of the football, Jake Ferguson, with how bad the tight end landscape is, he's only 5 targets behind Lamb. He's only 5 targets behind Lamb on the season. And he had an 89% route participation rate last week. He led the team in targets last week. This is a game where you're right. It could be an offensive battle or it could be a defensive battle. But if it's an offensive battle, that just means that there are points to be had. And if it's a defensive battle, then I think these are two teams that still need to move the ball and not two teams that are trying to kill clock. Meaning we're going to see a lot of passing either way. Unless it's a blowout, I think we're going to see a lot of passing. So I think a guy like Jake Ferguson, who Dak used a lot last week to move the chains, especially towards the end of that game. Well, not really towards the end, but when they were really trying to move the ball, that's when they started using Jake Ferguson the most. So I do like Jake Ferguson a lot. I actually have to flex him in 2 leagues, believe it or not. That's how bad these bye weeks got me right now. But I'm flexing Jake Ferguson in 2 leagues. Not starting, flexing. I have Mark Andrews in one, Travis Kelce in another, and he is my starting flex player. So Godspeed, as I said like 3 times. Last game here, Packers versus Raiders. Monday night game. I think this is a good opportunity for guys like Christian Watson and Aaron Jones to kind of bounce back. I'm going to be starting Christian Watson in the leagues that I have him in, and I'll be starting Aaron Jones if I had him in any leagues. Do we trust Romeo Doubs or Jaden Reed as flex plays, or do we just confidently start Romeo Doubs based on how he did last week?
Right, that's sort of the boat I'm in. Is Romeo Doubs at this point? All we've seen from Jordan Love is peppering him with targets, and he seemed even in the preseason seemed to be Jordan Love's guy. So while I do think Christian Watson's eventually going to take over that wide receiver one position on the team, we haven't seen it yet. And that makes Romeo Doubs probably a weekly flex, at least until we see that target share go down. But as you said, this is a get right spot for Aaron Jones, who disappointed a ton of fantasy owners last week. Hopefully, a get right spot for Christian Watson, too. And then a get right spot for a couple of the Raiders as well.
Yeah, I agree. And there's really not much to put on the Raiders other than potentially flexing Jacoby Myers with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back. Jerry Alexander's going to be on Devontae Adams. Is this Adams' first game against the Packers?
I think it is. I think that's why it's Monday Night Football.
Can't think of another reason why the Raiders and Packers would be on Monday Night Football. So I guess that's a pretty good reason. Yeah, so obviously we're all starting Devontae Adams. That's not even a question. So thank you guys for checking in for week 5. As a reminder, you can use code ANDLES and Underdog's going to match your first deposit up to $500 for a limited time only. Go check that out. We're always posting on Thursday our picks for each week. So definitely something to check out. Luke, as always, thank you for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.